Hello everybody, it's Peter with an I, S-T-A-W-A-R-T, and welcome to segment 3 of, I don't know, the Dark Tower, I guess? This is one of many YouTube projects that I've done. I'll quickly tell you about another one of my projects. In the PIRSViola series, I slowly roll through sheet music I made and show you exactly which keys to press on the saxophone. It's for people who want to learn and practice the saxophone. You can find the first one at PIRSViola-1-0. As it stands, there are 107 songs to practice with. And now we return to, I don't know, the Dark Tower, I guess?
Pinocchio. The manager didn't deserve such awful treatment. At the same time, he totally deserved it. He retreated to the back to call the mall security guard, who would come along and give him the eye, maybe ask him if everything was alright, and if he was finding everything okay, and if the manager's wish came true, take out his nightstick and beat him with reckless abandon. Frank couldn't help but feel a sense of delighted bloodthirst, witnessing what Pottymouth did. He had completely forgotten about all the little cutting insults that Pottymouth had sprung on him, and Frank wanted to run in his pack, to stand behind him while he told people off, and if they said anything in their own defense, he and Pottymouth would be given license to beat their victims silly for shooting their mouth off. So how about that lunch? It's on me, offered Pottymouth. The little angel on Frank's shoulder reminded him that he lived in what was still a decent society. It was about 20 years behind LA, and it didn't need the likes of Pottymouth stirring up trouble. Frank felt like a Judas for betraying him after he had told off the manager for him, but he knew it was best for his soul not to be around his poison. And besides, he knew that if there was no one else to bully, Pottymouth would only have one direction in which to turn his aggressions. Were the 3 words that said it all. The rest of Frank's words were just an extended logistical fart, and Pottymouth knew it. As Frank went on about how he only ate kosher ham, and the place didn't have that on their menu, Pottymouth's jovial expression was soured with disgust. As Frank finished lying, Pottymouth stood there looking at him for an uncomfortably long time without saying anything. He could have laid into him, but instead he just grunted. He shook his head and turned to walk away. Frank felt horrible. He resisted the temptation to plead with Pottymouth for a second chance. "I'll be seeing you later," Frank said cheerily, in hopes of partially mending the situation. "Ah, the hell with you," replied Pottymouth with a batting motion. Frank was racked with guilt. He replayed his interaction with Pottymouth over and over in his head for the rest of his shift, and then continued thinking about it that night. He would get a break from replaying it in his head while he was busy in the kitchen making dinner, but as he ate, and while he laid in bed, and when he woke up in the morning, and while he went to work the next day, that would be the only thing Frank could think about. The manager would feel angry for about as long as Frank felt guilty, and however much he knew he should just let it go and ignore jerks like Pottymouth, he just couldn't without the help of a good lobotomy. All the bad feelings held by Frank and the manager were a trifle in comparison to the hell Pottymouth had to live with. Pottymouth had left the mall, but Frank's ordeal with him had just begun. Chapter 3. "Don't worry about it, Joe. I got it," said Chauncey, when Joe started looking up the prices of the matinee for the next showing of Diablo. His wincing like he needed glasses to make it clear he was looking at prices while getting out his wallet paid off when Chauncey got the hint. Joe was about ready to practice Lamaze breathing techniques while counting out his money. Joe put his wallet back and let out a silent sigh of relief, having escaped paying once again. Frank was always working and never seemed to have any money. But Joe was never working, but always seemed to escape situations with a few bills in his pocket. He had a job babysitting for a while. Ordinarily, babysitting is a tough job that pays very little. For Joe, it turned out to be an easy job, which paid a lot. When the parents came home from a night out, the kid would be absolutely exhausted and sleep the whole night through without the influence of hard alcohol. Nothing in the house would be broken from curious fingers, and the child would wake up the next morning appreciating and loving their parents tenfold more than when they left the night before. Joe's wages were always complemented with a healthy green tip. The reason the kid would be so worn out, because he or she would be absolutely screaming their lungs out the entire time Joe was there. Joe found it difficult to concentrate on the television with all that noise, so he would just put the screaming kid in the other room. Joe knew it's unsafe to let wee ones run around by themselves. After all, anything can happen. They could topple a vase and roll around in broken glass, or swallow an electric cord. So, for their safety, Joe put them in a room that was hazard-free, which happened to be the closet. Joe could watch television and rest easy, knowing that the kid was perfectly healthy. He knew because he could hear the muffled wailing going on through the barred door. If the wailing ever stopped, Joe could check to make sure nothing was wrong by waking him up. When the screaming continued, Joe could go back to watching TV. To Joe, this seemed perfectly acceptable. When he was a wee one, he would get locked in a small cage for hours on end. The small cage happened to be a standard crib, and the hours he spent in there were during bedtime. Details. Joe was finally fired, and quite brutally so, when the parents came home one night, and Joe described his routine of letting the kid play in the closet. He wondered why they were getting all upset, even before he got to the bad part. The parents wondered how in God's name it could get any worse. Joe tried to make the point of his description seem a little less significant by adding a little embarrassed chuckle when he told them, "You know, it's the funniest thing. When I was letting him crawl in there to play, somehow he must have got his finger stuck in the door." Needless to say, it came as quite a relief to the kid when Joe opened the door back up after an hour and a half. Joe's little joke about catch and release wasn't well received. By the end of the story, the father was marching upstairs to look in the closet. Actually, the kid was playing in the downstairs closet, he called to the upper landing. "That may be so," blared the wife, "but we keep the gun in the upstairs closet." Joe left before he not only got fired, but fired upon. "You blood of a bitch!" The line for the movie was pretty long, which was okay for Joe because he felt it gave him time to get exposure, to advertise to the public that he was hanging around with a super cool dude like Chauncey, and by doing so, prove to everyone that he himself must be cool. The relationship, in a way, was symbiotic because Chauncey knew that by hanging around Joe, he alone would be the star and wouldn't have to share the spotlight like he did with his longtime friend, Charles. He didn't like hanging around with Charles anymore, because when they would get around girls, there seemed to be a competition between the two boys. Chauncey would have no problem going solo, but it always looks good to have friends along, so people know you're a somebody. With Joe around, there was no competition. The only thing Chauncey had to put up with was Joe's incessant need to take photographs everywhere, as proof that he hung out with a cool guy. When Joe got his first roll of film back, he realized the pictures were